What is reality? Only what I allow you to believe.
So today I want to go over another ridiculously strong Druid build for Season 10 of Diablo 4, and this is going to be a Shred Druid, and this is just one of the more fun builds I've played in a while, just because it feels exactly like what you would expect a Shred Druid to play like. And this build may be a bit easier to gear for because we're only using one Mythic and we're using 3 Chaos Uniques. So for the Mythic, we're using Era Perdition, primarily just for damage increase. You just get a big multiplicative damage increase for its special, and then plus to core skills is really good. Lucky a Chance can also help a decent bit. Then for our Chaos Uniques, we're using Malefic Crescent. Now this is probably the most important one for the build because its special is Lupine's Ferocity's critical strike damage is increased by 240% for consecutive critical strikes. Now this is the capstone in our talent tree. It's essentially just every third werewolf crit does a ton of additional damage, and this just massively buffs that up. And you'll notice if you do some high pit runs, once you get to the boss will randomly just lose like a large chunk of its health. That's this proccing as like an overpower or something. So it does ridiculous damage. Then we're using Banish Lord's Talisman, which after you spend 275 of your primary resource, your next core skill is guaranteed to overpower, and your critical strikes that overpower deal massively increased damage. So this will add a bunch of overpowers to our build. This actually procs a ridiculous amount because of how we build into Shred. And then we have Fist of Fate, which your attacks just randomly deal from 1 to 360% of their normal damage, so can just randomly cycle through and generally does a lot more damage. We also get our way to apply vulnerable to enemies off of this, and generally just has pretty good stats. But that brings us into our skill tree. 2 points into any basic doesn't matter, you're not using them at all. We have 5 points into Shred, our main damaging ability. And if you've never really used Shred, it's a 3-part attack. So it essentially just does different things for the first 3 times you hit it, then it resets for the next time. And upgrade 1, Shred now has increased attack speed and heals you if any enemy is struck. Then the third is Primal Shred. Shred's additional attacks also perform a dash, so every part of Shred is now a dash, and Shred's critical strike damage is massively increased. So Shred is going to be a main movement ability. It'll just dash us around to everything, and our main damaging ability. It also heals us a bunch as well. Then at 5 points into Earthen Bulwark, this is just a big barrier. You're not actually pressing this yourself. This will be procced off of a rune. We constantly proc it, so we just get massive barriers at all time. Upgrade 1 gives us Unstoppable. Upgrade 2 gives us Fortify. This is primarily to make sure we're always fortified because you are in direct melee range at all times, which makes you just a lot less tanky or just more susceptible to taking more damage. 5 points into Cyclone Armor for non-physical damage reduction. This goes on your bar, and even if we can't use it, it'll still give us the damage reduction. 1 into Bloodhowl, which is just a heal. Upgrade 1 reduces its cooldown, which really doesn't matter, but upgrade 2, which is the thing that matters, is we get increased damage while in Werewolf and for the whole time. You will be using Bloodhowl a decent bit because you constantly are shapeshifting automatically, but it's not that big of a deal really. And then we're going all the way down to take our ultimate, which is Grizzly Rage. 5 points into it not only reduces its cooldown, but gives you 30% armor while it's active, which is really good. Upgrade 1, you're always unstoppable. Upgrade 2, you fortify every second you're in it. Then we go into our passives. 1 to Heart of the Wild, 3 into Wild Impulse. Your core skills cost more but deal more damage. 3 and 2 increase movement speed while in Werewolf. 1 into Ancestral Fortitude. You can put more points into this if you need it, but you probably won't. Take a 3 into Vigilance, which is damage reduction after using a defensive. 3 into Backlash, which is damage increasing after using a defensive. These will be procced almost all the time. And then going down 3 points into Feral Aptitude, we deal increased damage while healthy, more increased damage while above 100% movement speed. Then 1 into Neurotoxin. 3 into Toxic Claws, we deal increased poison damage, doubled in Werewolf. 3 into Envenom, you deal increased critical strike damage to poison enemies. Then we have 3 into Defiance, nature skills deal increased damage to elites. 3 into Resonance, so nature skills deal increased damage. 3 into Quick Shift, which shapeshifting into a new animal form gives you a stack of this. It stacks up, and when we're in an animal form, it doesn't lose duration. Now with this build, you don't have to worry about stacking this because it will automatically be stacked by just being Grizzly Rage and one of our runes proccing. Then we have 3 into Heightened Senses, when shapeshifting Werebear gains increased damage reduction and Werewolf gains increased movement speed. Then we have our capstone, which is very important. Every third Werewolf skill hit critically strikes. Werewolf critical strikes deal massively increased damage. Now this is such a massive damage increase because of our unique chest piece, so this just does absurdly high damage. Then we have our Paragon board. Starting with our first board, board, we're using Shapeshifter, which is a bonus to rare nodes within range. The secondary is Shapeshifting, increase your critical strike chance and damage for 2 seconds, which will be procced a majority of the time. The legendary is increased critical strike damage. Then the first board we're taking is Lust for Carnage. Critical strikes with werewolf skills restore spirit and do increased damage. The glyph we're taking is Fang and Claw, bonus to magic nodes within range. Then the secondary is Wow and Werewolf. Close enemies take increased damage from you. The legendary is increased damage while Shapeshift. The next board is Heightened Malice. Deal increased damage when poison enemies are near you. This stacks up to 4. The glyph for taking is Spirit for increased critical strike damage within range. Then the secondary is critting an enemy, makes them take more damage from you, stacking up. The legendary is increased critical strike damage. Then the next board is Inner Beast. After shapeshifting, your spirit costs are reduced by 5% for 10 seconds, up to 45%. If you reach 10 stacks, this bonus resets and reduces the cooldown of your ultimate. Now this isn't super needed for the build, but you can get it pretty easily for not a ton of points, and it's just to make sure you never have to care about spirit and you never really have to care about your ultimate cooldown. And we have Keeper, a bonus to rare nodes within range. The secondary is you deal increase on physical damage. The legendary is increased non-physical damage. The final board is Ancestral Guidance. After spending 75 spirit, deal increased damage. This is absolutely massive. This will be procced all of the time. Then we have Dominate as a glyph, which is a bonus to overpower damage within range. The secondary is when you overpower an enemy, they take increased damage from you. The legendary is increased overpower damage. Then for our spirit boons, we have Get to the Stag for just increased spirit and you gain spirit per second. We have Avian Wraith for increased critical strike damage. We have Iron Feather for increased max life. Now you can go swooping attacks, but generally if your gear's decently rolled, you shouldn't need this. And the increased survivability is probably more needed, especially if you're doing higher pit runs. Energize, which is just a chance to fully restore your spirit. I don't even know if you necessarily need this either, but there's nothing really else in this row that's that useful. Then Masochistic, which is a lucky hit. Critical strike with shapeshifting skills have up to a 75% chance to heal you for quite a lot. I don't know if you need this either. If you're taking a lot of damage constantly, like in high pit runs, you'll need this, but you could switch over to Overload, which will give you some additional damage, just not a ton of additional damage, so it really doesn't matter either way. Then we have our Mercenaries. Our Mercenary is going to be Subo, going to Wire Trap, going to Piercing Arrows, going to Cover Fire, and then Opening Fire, so enemies take increased damage from covering fire. You can also use Rahir and go into like Resistances or Armor. If you need those, you probably won't need those though. Then the reinforcement is Variana with Bloodthirst. When she uses this, it gives you an increase to your attack speed, and just put it on whatever ability you want. You could just put it on Shred if you really want to. If you want some more control, you could put it on something like Bloodhound, but it really doesn't matter that much. And then that brings us to our Chaos perks. Our unique is going to be Brawn over Brains. It gives us massively increased life, healing, and overpower damage, but your resistances are reduced by 25%, and your damage reduction from armor is reduced to 60%. So this means the cap of your resistances and armor is reduced, but you don't need as much armor or resistances to get to your cap either. So it makes gearing more easy, and you're still really tanky through the other stats you get from this. Then Purge the Infected. Your core skills apply poisoning to the target, and if you hit a poison target with a core skill, it'll spend 5 spirit to be a guaranteed crit and deal more damage, which will be all the time. Overabundance. Every 100 spirit you generate above your maximum increases your damage by 100%, stacks up 3 times. This will be procced a majority of the time. And then our last option isn't really anything too good. We have Accelerating Chaos, which damaging an enemy has a chance to trigger a chaotic burst, dealing some damage and reducing your active cooldowns. You really don't have another super impactful thing you can put here. And then that brings us to our gear, starting with our gems. In your weapons, because we are using a one-hander and an offhand, you have critical strike damage. In your jewelry, you probably want all armor. If you have armor cap and not resistances, just use some diamond gems in your jewelry, but you'll probably just use all skulls. In your one piece of armor, you're using willpower. Your other 2 pieces of armor, we're using our rune sets. The first one is Cast 2 Mobility or Mahab skills, and you do this 3 times, and your next attack will cause all of your hits to be guaranteed crits and overpowers for 0.35 seconds. Now, our Shred is considered movement, so this will proc a lot. Then, cast a non-channel core skill 12 times. This procs so much because of one of our aspects, and this will invoke our Druid's Earthen Bulwark, giving it to us for 3 seconds. But because we have all of these points into our Earthen Bulwark with the upgrades, it will give us all those upgrades as well. So this will just give us massive defensive qualities consistently. And then that brings us into our aspects. So on our necklace, critical strikes with Shred deal a percentage of the damage dealt as lightning damage to the target and surrounding enemies. This gives us a decent bit of AoE. It's not really large AoE, but a majority of our Shred damage is going to be AoEing lightning. And then all of our other offensive aspects, you can put anywhere you want because we're not using a 2-hander. So you have Shreds deal a lot more damage, and Shred has a 33% chance to land an additional strike up to 4 times. So this is what you'll see in the footage or when you play it, when you just shred once and it looks like shred just goes off a bunch of times, that's essentially what's happening with this. It's just a big buff to shred, and shred will just proc a bunch of additional times for free instantly. And this is what makes this build feel like you're actually playing a shred build, because you're just running around and you're just shredding like dozens of times constantly. It's pretty crazy. Then we have, while Grizzly Rage is active, your direct damage is converted into poison damage. You deal a pretty big increase to poison damage and you passively spread rabies. This is just for some massively increased scaling and damage. Then the duration of Grizzly Rage is increased by up to 10 seconds. And when we crit in Grizzly Rage, it gives us increased critical strike damage, stacking up to 100%. Then we have, after critically striking an enemy with shred, you gain spirit. And while at 100 spirit, your werewolf skills do increase damage until you go below 30 spirit. So this will just always be a damage increase because we'll never go below 30 spirit, at least with how I have the build. Then finally, we have Grizzly Rage is now a werewolf skill, shapeshift you into a dire werewolf, and you gain increased movement spirit and spirit cost reduction. When you kill, you also heal. So this is just what allows us to use our werewolf skills while in Grizzly Rage. Then for some of the more important stats on your necklace, you always want to try to get a % willpower roll, and then like Envenom or Toxic Claws or any other passive. You're also going to be wanting tempering rolls for werewolf attack speed on pretty much all of your pieces or a lot of your pieces. That'll give us a lot of the attack speed we need. On both your main hand and offhand, you want chance for shred to deal double damage. That's obviously going to be pretty massive. And those are generally going to be the more important rolls you need to focus on. But that's the entirety of this build, and this build is legitimately so easy to play with how this is set up. Essentially, you just go in Grizzly Rage, you pop your Blood Howl, and you just run around shredding things. That's legitimately all you do, because you don't have to stack up any passives or anything like that. Because we're in Grizzly Rage, and we have the rune to proc our Earthen Bulwark, when our Earthen Bulwark procs, it puts us into human form, which will stack up our passives that you usually need to manually stack. So you just pop Grizzly Rage, and you spam shred at all times. You Blood Howl a lot. If you're just AoE farming or not on a boss or something, you can just use Blood Howl less. Because we're going out of werewolf, the damage buff from Blood Howl will fall off a decent bit, but it's not too big of a deal. Just Blood Howl every once in a while and you'll generally be fine. And other than that, you're just shredding. It's your movement skill. It dashes you around. It heals you a bunch. It does ridiculous damage. It does your AoE. So it's basically a one button build after you press Grizzly Rage. But that's all I want to go over. So thanks for watching.